the Arch Gaming Network is proud to bring you this board game review. Now here's your host, Sean Smith.
Hello, and thank you for stopping by. Today we are taking a look at a game that is coming to Kickstarter in September of 2018. It is called the Artemis Project, and this was designed by Daryl Chow and Daniel Roche and published by Grand Gamers Guild. Now, like I said, this game is coming out in September to Kickstarter. I was given a prototype version to review, so this is not a paid review, and the components and the rules may not be final from what you see during the review. So when the Kickstarter is launched, I'll leave a link in the description below if you're wanting to check that out. Now, the premise of the game is that it takes place on Jupiter's moon. Half the game has you building a colony underneath the ice crust surface, and that actually takes place in the ocean. You're going to be building up your colony and building some buildings that'll help you gather some resources. In the second half of the game, it's going to take place on the ice surface of Jupiter's moon, and hopefully it will have your thriving colony out there building some more building and new technologies as well. This is a worker placement game for 2 to 4 players, and it uses dice as the workers, so you'll be rolling them and then using them to place them out on the board. You'll use them to gather resources, go on your expeditions. You're going to bid on buildings and also gather some new colonists, and there's some other things that you can do. So why don't we take a look at the game? We'll go over the setup, and you'll get most of the rules of how to play. It won't be a full tutorial, especially since rules in that aren't finalized. But we'll take a look at that, and then I'll come back to you on the other side and let you know what I think. All right, to set up the Artemis Project, you'll put the game board in the center of the table. This board is broken really into 2 sections. You have an ocean section and a surface section, which you'll hear me refer to during the game. You also have a bunch of colonists, these wooden cubes. The blue are engineers, the brown are pioneers, the red are marines, and the purple are stewards. You have a bag. Just going to place all of them. That was not all of them, but give them a good shake, and then we're going to be setting up for a 3-player game. So we're going to go around the board setting up the various spots, and the first thing we're going to set up is the expedition area. Now, you have a number of expedition cards here worth different values, different types of bonuses that are on them. You can shuffle those, and you are going to put out number of expeditions equal to the number of players minus 1. So in our case, we will be putting 2 out here. Now, whenever you see a symbol like this here, this means that you need to seed that with some colonists. So we'll just reach into the bag. I'm going to pull out 2 to place right here. So we have a pioneer and a steward, and then we'll pull out 1 right here, another pioneer. All right, next we have the vents and the mines, and to set those up, we're going to fill these areas with energy here, minerals here. Now, you're going to take a number of dice, these black dice here, equal to the number of players, and you're going to just roll them. And then this is going to tell you how many that you will put out in energy. So this says that you'll put out 9 energy cubes. Now, no matter what you roll, and this will be the same for both of these places, you're going to put out at least a minimum of 2 per player. So in this case, we'd be putting out at least 6, but because it was 9, we will go ahead and put out 9 cubes here. Now, this is not all the cubes in the game. I've left a number of the components back just to keep it from getting crowded. Well, we'll do the same thing for the minerals here, and that is 17 minerals. My goodness, that might be all of them that I actually took out of the bag, but You know, we'll just sprinkle them in here, you know, making it rain. And I know that's not 17, but you get the point.
What?
Next, you're going to work on the gantry. That's these buildings. Now, in the game, there are two different types of building tiles. You have your ocean tiles, which are the dark colored with numbered 1, 2, and 3. And then you have the surface tiles, lighter color 4, 5, 6. Now, in the first 3 rounds, you're going to be using the ocean tiles. So you will be putting out a number of ocean tiles equal to the number of players plus 1. So we would be putting out 4. Now these tiles, they're basically the engine building part of the game. For example, if you can staff this, this tells you what kind of colonists need to be filling up this spot. You need 1 engineer and 1 colonist of any color. Basically, it's just going to tell you you're going to get 2 tools at the end of the round. Here, if you have a pioneer and an engineer, you're going to get an energy and a mineral at the end of the round. All right, before we do the doorstep, we do need to set up the academy here. The academy, basically, you're going to take 4 colonists of each of the specialized colors, the purple, red, and blue, and just place those here. Also, you're going to give 1 brown pioneer to every player to put in your shelter, which is on your player board. Then you're going to work on filling the doorstep. And the doorstep, you're just going to draw out of the bag a number of colonists equal to the number of players plus 2. So in our case, we would be pulling out 5 colonists here and just place them right there. You have this marker here. You'll just place this by the letter A. All right, now you have some event cards. There are a bunch of different events in the game, and they are all lettered. What you're going to do is shuffle those. You're going to draw out 6. This game is played over 6 rounds. Put the rest of them back in the box, and then you can turn over the first event, and this one is Tentacles from the Deep. The players with the most dice in the vents and the players with the most dice in the mines lose 1 colonist of their choice. That's the vents and the mines here. But you're going to take this pink marking here and you're going to place it on the B. That is to remind everybody, and you can put the event kind of close to where that's going to happen, to remind all the players as you are resolving the different worker placement places, you will need to resolve that event. All right, also, like you said, in rounds 4, 5, and 6, you'll start using the surface tiles. Now, the surface tiles basically are end game points. They're victory points you can get. And for example, this one, if it's staffed with 2 engineers, you're going to get a victory point at the end of the game. Plus, victory point times every 2 engineer you have in your colony. This is the same thing, but with pioneers. This one here, if you can fully staff it, is worth just a straight up 4 victory points. You'll then set up your player board, which is fairly simple to do. Every player is going to get 3 minerals. They're going to get 3 energy. Each player will get 5 dice of the same color, and they'll start with 1 pioneer in their shelters. All right, so the player board has lots of good information. For example, when you go on expeditions, you can take colonists with you. This explains what the benefits of doing that is or are. Then you have what happens at the end of a round, so that'll walk you through that. Also, victory point at the end of the 6th round. These will be the different ways that you can gain victory points. It also has a spot for you to have tools and your expedition badges, and then up here at the top is just where you'll store your dice during your turn. Off to the side here, you can also put your ocean tiles and your surface tiles. And finally, to save on the cubes in the game, you know, if you ever obtain more than 5 of each of these, you could just slide one over here to count it as 5 times for that particular resource. All right, I didn't mention in the setup, but you also have your scoring disc. This is the scoring track, and then this here is a relief track, and you have a colored disc of yours that you can place on each of those different tracks. Now, this isn't going to be a full how to play video. I am going to give you a lot of information on how to play, how the game works. But since rules are still being finalized, and again, the components are being finalized, these are not finalized components, I'm not going to give a complete set of rules on how to play. The object of the game is to have the most victory points at the end of the 6th round. Most of your scoring will come after the 6th round, but there are ways that you can pick up victory points here and there along the way. The way that you're going to do that is by getting a colony together, trying to have the best colony, build buildings, and then staff those buildings to kind of create your engine and to create ways to score at the end of the game. The way that a round works is that after we refresh the board, we go through the steps, putting out new buildings, new expeditions, putting out new resources, and refilling the doorstep as needed. All players simultaneously will take their dice, all right, and then they will roll them. Ooh. And now I have to pick up the spare. Oh, I am terrible. Anyway, once you have rolled your dice, you can just place those onto your player board in any order. It doesn't really matter. Up at the top of that player board, like we saw earlier, we'll just put these right here for now. All right. After everyone has rolled their dice, the worker placement phase will begin, and we're using the dice to go to the various spaces on the board so that at the end of the round we can take the actions. And we're going to take the actions in alphabetical order, starting with A and working our way all the way around to G here, remembering that as we drew earlier, B is going to have an event happen. This marker here is just to be used so as you're scoring or resolving each action, all players will know what action you are currently on. We don't need it right now, so see ya. Now, all of the worker placement spots will resolve after everyone has placed all of their dice. There is one exception to that, and that is these two spaces here, which will resolve immediately. This is a way for you to get tools. So if I took a die and put it there, since it's a 6, it says that I get 2 tools. So tools are helpful because they allow you to change a die value, your die value, either up 1 or down 1 before you place it. Once you've placed a die out on the board, you can no longer change its die value. Also, if you have the most, you're going to get 2 victory points at the end of the game. All right, so the first place that you can go to is the expeditions here. Now, expeditions have a value. So to complete this expedition, we're going to have dice values on this expedition that are equal to or greater than 8. And then at the bottom it has some rewards, either a colonist or 3 energy. This one is 2 colonists and 1 energy. 1 victory point. So if you want to go on an expedition, you're just going to take one of your dice, choose the expedition you want to go on, and put it at the bottom. This signifies that you're the first person to go on that expedition, and you have brought a value of 4. Now, when you go on an expedition, you are allowed to bring colonists or colonists from your shelters along on the expedition. Not going to go into the rules on how that works, but they can increase your die value or give you special bonuses and other things if you do that. And then that would be my turn. So maybe the green player now comes and says, you know what, I'm going to place a 1 there. We now have a value of 5. That expedition will not succeed yet. So then maybe the red player says, you know what, I think I want to get in on this too, and puts a red 4 there. Now at the end of the round, when everyone has placed their dice, when we go to resolve the expeditions, we're going to look to see if the expedition has die values equal to or greater than the number up there, which is 8. Since it does, we have 9, the rewards are going to be given out. Now the first thing you're going to do is see who contributed the most in value to that expedition. Well, the blue player and the red player both contributed 4. So we have a tie. The way that you break a tie is whoever put a die down first, they will get to choose the first reward, and they will go ahead and choose these 2 colonists. These colonists will go into the shelter on your main board. However, if you have built buildings and you have space for them on those buildings, you are allowed to put them in there at this time. The red player would get the leftover reward, which is 1 victory point. The green player loses out. They don't get any reward. However, there is this relief track here. So if you place a die and you don't get a reward, you will get to move up this relief track, and this relief track will give you certain bonuses as you go up it. Also, each player who went on an expedition, whether it was successful or not, is going to get an expedition badge. All right, you can place that onto your designated spot on the player board. If you have the most expeditions at the end of the game, you're going to get 2 victory points. And if you have the fewest, you lose 1 victory point. Now, the next 2 sections are the vents and the mine. Now, energy is stored at the vents, and energy is useful for obtaining new colonists up at the doorstep up here, and for helping keep your colonists and your shelters alive at the end of each round. You're going to have to pay energy to make sure they stay warm enough, don't freeze to death. Ooh, how sad. Minerals, on the other hand, are used for building buildings, which we'll see in a moment. Now, both of these tracks work the same way. If you decide to go there, you're going to place a die in the far left box. This is how many pieces of energy you plan to pick up at the end of the round. It'd be the same for the mines as well, the minerals. Now, if another player comes along and they do something lower, they're going to push you off to the right. And then maybe the red player comes in with a 4. Well, that's lower than the 5, so they would move the 5 down, but they would put it to the right of the 4. If I then decided to come back and say I was going to put a 3, I could move these 2 down and put this 3 to the right of the existing 3. Now, at the end of the round, when you are picking up the energy, you'll start from left to right. So the green player would get 3, we would get 3, red would get 4, then blue would get 5. However, if we were to take some of these away, 3, the green player and us, we both got 3 pieces of energy, but there is only 3 left, which means that the red player will only get 3 pieces of energy. And for our 5 that we had out here, we will get nothing for that, but we will get to move up the relief track. And again, the mines work the same way. All right, the next thing you can do is bid on the various buildings. To bid on a building, you're going to take one of your dice and just place it on that building. You are saying that you will pay 3 minerals to build this building. Now, when you put the die down, you do not have to have those minerals in hand when you're making the bid. You just have to make sure that you have them at the time that this is being resolved. Remember, this track here, the mineral track, is going to score or resolve before the building track. So you can hope to gain the necessary minerals so that you can buy the building. The green player could really like that spot as well, and then they could bid higher than you. You still keep your die on there, and on a later turn, you could then maybe up your own bid to a 5. Or maybe you don't want to spend that, so maybe you just go to a different building altogether. When the buildings resolve, whoever has the highest die value on a building will get to take that building and immediately place it onto their or next to their player board. If you were outbid, then you get to move up the relief track. The doorstep works the same way as the vent and the mines, in that when you put a die on here, another player can come in here and push you to the side here. All right. Now, the value of the die that you place will determine how many colonists you may acquire during that phase when it's resolved. So if you put a 1 or a 2 down, you will be allowed to get 1 colonist of your choice from the doorstep. If you put a 5 or a 6, you can acquire from 1 to 3 colonists of your choice. Now, when you acquire a colonist, every colonist that you acquire will take 2 energy. All right, so if I had the 6 here and I decided that I wanted to get 3 colonists, provided there were any left when it got to me, I would need to pay 6 energy to pick up 3. All right, the last spot that you can go is the Academy. Now, in a 3-player game, there are 2 spots that you can go to. Same with a 4-player game. In a 1 or 2-player, there's only 1 spot to go per round. When you take that action, you're going to place a die, but you also must bring a colonist from your shelters. You cannot rely on getting one from the doorstep. You must bring it at the time that you go to the Academy. So what this is saying is that if it is a 1 or a 2, I can exchange this Pioneer for one of these Engineers, and the Pioneer would just go out of the game. It's important to note that the Pioneers are the most common in the game, and then the Engineers, the blue, are the second most, and then the Marines and the Stewards, the red and the purple, are the rarest of the colonists in the game. All right, like I said, once everyone has placed all their dice, then you're going to start resolving from A, working your way all the way around, knowing here at B, you are going to run into an event that you've resolved at that time. Once that is done, you will move to the end of round phase. All right, at the end of the round, you're going to perform the following actions in this order. The first thing you're going to do is you can perform 1 colonist move or swap. So I could take a colonist and move it, 1 colonist, to an empty space. All right, the next thing you can do is swap to Pioneer. So maybe I didn't want this purple in this spot. Maybe I wanted the Pioneer there and save the Steward for something else. You are allowed to swap any 2 cubes, whether they're 2 cubes between 2 buildings or from the shelter to a building. Next, you will activate any of your fully staffed buildings. So these buildings here are fully staffed. So this is telling us that I'm going to get 2 tools, and this one here says that I get 1 mineral, plus I get an extra mineral for every blue Engineer I have in this box, in one of these boxes. Since I did have 1 here, that means I'm going to get 2 minerals. After you've activated your buildings, you now need to pay energy for every colonist you have in your shelter. I have 1 colonist, so I'll have to pay 1 energy. If I didn't have any energy, I would lose some of the colonists in my shelter, and it would be up to me to decide who got kicked out into the cold.
Fine. You want me gone?
You're then going to refresh the game board. So you will clear any expeditions, and you'll add 1 expedition per player, again, -1. You will roll for the vents, roll for the quarries to restock those. The gantry, you'll put out new buildings. You leave the buildings that were there if they weren't taken and just put out new ones up to a maximum of 8. You can never have more than 8 out there at a time. You're also going to refill the doorstep up to a maximum of 12. There's nothing that you need to do for the Academy. Those cubes that are out there are the only ones available. Once those are gone, they are gone. You'll then draw a new event and mark it so that everybody knows when that event will occur. And then you're going to count up whoever has the fewest resources. These are resources here. Whoever has the fewest will then get to decide who will be the first player for the next round. You're going to do this for 6 rounds, and then you are going to go through and tally up your end of game victory points. All right, and at the end of the game, you are going to take any leftover energy and minerals, and if you have it's basically a 5-to-1 ratio, and you can do that up to 3 times, a maximum of 3 points. So the max you could get would be 6 points, 3 for energy, 3 for minerals, if you had enough there. Next, you're going to look at your fully staffed buildings. Again, that's these that come out in rounds 4, 5, and 6. If they're fully staffed, this one would have 4 victory points. Then you're just going to look at the number of buildings you have built, whether they're fully staffed or not. If you were to have 5 buildings, you would get 3 victory points. Then you're going to take all your colonists and break them up into sets, and you're going to get 3 points for each complete set of the 4 different colors. Then you will set those aside after you've counted those, and then whatever is left over, it's a 3-to-1 ratio on victory points. The person who had the most expeditions gets 2 points, the fewest -1 point, and whoever has the most tools gets 2 points. Whoever has the most victory points is the winner of the game. Okay, so that was the Artemis Project. Now, let's talk about the components. You know, as I mentioned earlier, they are not finalized yet, so I guess there's not a whole lot to say about the components. I'll say that the artwork that is in the game is really nice. I really liked that the art in it. The player boards have a lot of information on it, like how to wrap up a round and all the different end game scoring conditions. And there's some good art on there as well. Easy to read. The player board is put together. It's well designed. If the energy and mineral components are finalized for the game, I think they're well done. I would like to see maybe some 5x components, you know, maybe make a larger mineral or a larger energy, or maybe a separate color or something to represent 5 of them, because the board can kind of get it can get crowded with the different resources as you're putting them out there. All right, so let's talk about the gameplay. I love worker placement games, and I really like when dice are used as the workers. It kind of breaks it up from your typical worker placement. Now, I like dice used as workers, provided there are good ways to use dice of all of the values. If if you have a game where, the lower numbers aren't as valuable or as useful as the higher numbers, and there's no way to mitigate that, then the game suffers. But this game has that taken care of. There are a number of different ways. First, you can use tools to manipulate the value of the dice. And then you have, if you're going on expeditions, there are ways that you can manipulate other players' dice or add to your own value by using pioneers or other colonists. Also, you have that relief track so that maybe you play a lower number dice on something and it doesn't work. You get outbid, or you miss out on getting some different expedition bonuses. You can go up on that relief track that can give you valuable resources and or victory points the further up that track you progress. Also, with the way that the vents and the mines and the doorstep work, the lower numbers, while you're not going to get more of those resources, you can nudge other players out and get your resources first. You can kind of guarantee yourself a way to do that. So there are a lot of ways that numbers can be manipulated, and the value of the die can be helpful in many different situations, no matter what it is that you rolled. And like I said, I really like that dice mechanic. It's very unique on the mines and the vents and the doorstep. I don't recall another game that has this mechanic. Put it in the comments if there is. But the fact that you can nudge other players out, they put a high number down to get a bunch of energy, and then you come in with a lower number and push them, and then watch someone else push you or them. It leads to some great moments during the game, especially if you're the one that put that high number down and you start to slowly see it get pushed to the side and realize, oh my goodness, I'm not going to get anything. It tends to lead to some laughter. And it's not really mean, but it does provide some great moments. I like the bidding for the different buildings, but I feel there might be too many of them. In the games that I've played, there's not been a whole lot of fights over the buildings, as you're always putting out 1 per player plus 1. So first of all, you always have enough for all players to not have to fight over them if they don't want to. And in most of the games, we've usually been at the max, which is 8 buildings, usually within a couple of rounds. And because several of the buildings, there's 2 of them, there's really not a huge incentive to, get into a bidding war over them. I like how the buildings act as sort of a semi-engine building there, because you are able to pick up resources. We're talking about the ocean in the first half of the game. You're getting these building tiles out there. Try to make sure you get the right colonists in there, and then you're able to, like I said, build those resources or bonus points or whatever it is throughout the first half of the game, and even the later half of the game, the last half of the game, provided you leave those fully staffed. Now, there are some things I'd like to see tweaked, and I've been told that a number of these things will be addressed. One of the things we ran into in one of our plays is we ran out of colonists. And again, I've been told that in the preview copy that I had, they didn't put enough in there, and that in the final game there's supposed to be more of them. Also, in our games, we usually see the doorstep clogged up with pioneers. People are fighting at the doorstep to get those valuable Marines, the red, blue, and the purple colonists, and a lot of times you'll see the pioneers kind of left over. There's been some tweaking, I know, going on with the different cards that are in the game, and they've been talking about the balance of the different colonists that will come with the final game. So check out the Kickstarter to see how those things have been changed. I'd also like to see a little more fighting over the buildings. A lot of the buildings that we had in our game, they usually could be had for a bid of 1 or 2 minerals. Very rarely did we see people outbid somebody. It happened, but it wasn't that often. So because of that, what we see in the game is energy is much more valuable than minerals. And by the end of just about every game we've played, there has been a ton of minerals built up, in the mines, whereas people are usually fighting over that energy because they want to grab more colonists and, at the doorstep, and to keep those that they've left in their shelters safe as well. Finally, I think I'd like to see more event cards. There are a number of the event cards. I can't remember exactly how many. I think there's 10. And when you've played it several times, all the different events that are coming out. You're not always going to know which events, because you're only playing with 6 per game, so a number of them won't be out there. But I'd like to see a little more variety in the events that would happen. Now, a lot of this could be moot, because like I said, I've been told that they're reworking, the way some of the buildings, and while I was, playing this game to review it, they made some changes to some of the buildings, which changed the types of pioneers or types of colonists that you needed to staff them. They're talking about reworking the balance of the different colonists in the bag. So I think a lot of these things would be mitigated by making those changes. And I would say in the last 1 or 2 plays, or the last couple of plays that I had, where those new buildings tile or building requirements came out, it certainly made pioneers more valuable, because there were more spots where you could use the pioneers. So like I said, take some of those things that I think should be tweaked with a grain of salt, because again, a lot of it could be moot and changed by the time the Kickstarter launches. Again, check the campaign itself to give yourself an idea of what's going on there. Still, this is a very clever worker placement game. I like that it gives you tough choices that you have to make on how you want to use your dice. I have seen players who normally don't have trouble making decisions in worker placement games really have to think about what they wanted to do and choose based on the dice they had available, what other people had available, what turn they were going, what the turn order was. There was a lot of things to consider. And because the game tends to have a little bit of a pressure luck feel to it. Again, if you put a 6 down for energy because you really need energy, depending on what turn order you've done that, you may not end up with any, or may not even end up with 6. And I think that's a clever design choice, because you're pressing your luck. There's some bidding in there. There's some, battling between the different workers. A lot of worker placement games, you go to a place first, that's yours to do that round. This one is different because you have you can have fighting over the different places that you go to. Also, the scoring is tight in this game. There is actually not a lot of scoring during the game. You'll be playing this, you'll be 4 or 5 rounds in, and maybe you've gone up the scoring track 3 or 4 spaces, but maybe not a lot. A lot of the game scoring happens at the end of the game, so you're going to want to pay attention to all of the different end game scoring conditions, because that's where the bulk of them are going to come in. And I've seen the game be tight every time, which means you really have to make wise decisions when placing those workers and how you want to approach your game to try and win. So no rating yet, but I've really enjoyed it. I think this game is clever. I think it has some unique mechanics. Unlike other worker placement games, the fact that there is a lot of player interaction because of the way that the dice go in. You can slide in on some of those tracks or the expeditions. Do you put a die in there to try and get one of the bonuses, or do you leave that alone, forcing maybe someone else to use additional dice to do that? There's a lot going on here that I think is a good design choice. So if you want to check out the Kickstarter when it launches, I'll put a link in the description below, and check it out. I would recommend it. Like I said, I've enjoyed playing it. So if you've liked this review, please hit the thumbs up or leave a nice comment. Subscribe to our channel and check out our other great content. And once again, I thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for visiting the Arch Gaming Network. For more great content, check us out at archgamingnetwork.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook.